Welcome to the Folio Sightlines blog. I'm Greg Vidras, President of Folio Institutional, and I'm glad to have with us today Bob Veres, a futurist, speaker, author, founder of Inside Information, co-producer of the Insiders Forum, and one of the most influential people in the financial planning profession. Welcome, Bob. I'm delighted to have you with me today.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
So, as we get started here today, for our listeners, Bob has kindly agreed to join me in a conversation to dig deep into three important topics. First is the advisor and the firm of the future, the new client model, and finally we'll spend some time talking about crowdsourcing. Let's change gears here a little bit and go into a topic that I've actually been very excited to discuss with you when I was getting ready for this particular conversation. That's this notion of crowdsourcing. And that to me is one of the more exciting potential trends in the industry, and one of the things that I think has the potential to have a really a transformative effect on some of what goes on in our business. Maybe I could just ask you to spend a few moments and tell the listeners, when you say crowdsourcing, what is it you're referring to, and what are the natural advantages?
Well, there's two components to it, but the one that mostly affects advisors in the short term are these new platforms that are being set up, and the Folio Institutional Model Manager Exchange is one of 6 that I've identified. Actually, I think there's 7 now, and will be more. But basically what it is you can go into these exchanges and you can look at different portfolios that are being offered either for a fee or by advisors not for a fee that you can adopt, if you will. And so here's the big thing. I think the future of the mutual fund is not where the mutual fund does what it does today, which is trade portfolio, it buys and sells and wades into the market. If you look at the way mutual funds are consolidating today, any fund that goes into the market or any fund that tries to sell, buy or sell, I guess is the best way to say it, is creating a wind in their face. Whenever they trade, they wade in with an awful lot of money, and people notice that, and so they will demand a higher price or to buy at a lower price. And so you've got this drag on the portfolio just simply because of the trading processes that they have to go through to move that much money in and out of the market when they make a decision. That goes away if they simply sell their ideas. In other words, if they say, here is what we're saying today is we want to sell this position, and we want to replace it with this other position, and our research tells us that that'll be a good trade. So they send that out, and the advisor will have maybe 20 clients or 100 clients or whatever on that portfolio. The client can take a look then and create a tax overlay on that trade and say, all right, first of all, is that going to trigger a capital gain for this individual client? So you also get the benefit of individualized tax overlay, and there are software programs that are automating that process. If that was done by hand, it would be a nightmare, but it's not a nightmare now. So you eliminate the drag of large portfolios trying to move in and out of the market. And there's research now that, for example, Vanguard owns more than 5% of most companies in the S&P 500. We're talking about, the drag is becoming significant. And you're also adding a component of Advisor Alpha that I think is going to be increasingly important, and that's customized tax management. That's the ability to tax manage every transaction in the portfolio and to harvest losses and offset gains and basically create much more tax-efficient portfolios than what mutual funds can offer now, because, of course, funds are, they're paying attention to taxes globally, not individually. And the third component, what I'm envisioning is that advisors are going to, we'll talk about the folio, advisors create their own folios like Legos for their clients. So, you've got maybe 6 different portfolios, different places on the risk-return spectrum. And if they want to more finely tune that and put somebody on the efficient frontier between 2 of those portfolios, they just blend 2 of those folios together, and that becomes a different spot on the efficient frontier. They post whatever it is that they have put in that folio. Somebody else can go in there and say, that's pretty cool, that's interesting, but here's what I'm doing. And you're going to get mixing and matching and trading notes and comparing ideas, and in a way that the profession has never really done before. And I have to tell you, I get out more than most. The profession is pretty smart. There's an awful lot of thinking going on that really is not being shared in a meaningful way now that will be, I think, through these crowdsourcing platforms. So I see it as a way not only for funds to simply sell their best thinking, if you will, rather than the unwieldy system that they've set up, and not only a way for advisors to add tax alpha to client portfolios, but it's also a way for advisors to get smarter than their clients again. It used to be advisors knew a lot more about investing than their clients did. Now advisors know almost nothing more than clients know about investing. And I think the pendulum needs to swing back. And when I see these crowdsourcing options, that seems to me to be the mechanism where that pendulum will start swinging back, where advisors who compare notes will be more aware of the opportunity set and the way to deal with the opportunity set than their clients will be, because they're comparing notes and basically harvesting the wisdom of the crowd.
It's an incredibly interesting topic to explore. We certainly have seen with the Model Manager Exchange, but also just advisors that operate on the Folio platform, a real desire, if you will, to share ideas, exchange ideas, integrate different portfolio components or building blocks from third parties into their portfolio construction process. Looking at that whole concept, the winners, if you will, or those that stand to win through that process seem pretty clear. Beyond maybe just the traditional sort of product structure or product distribution model, is there a loser in this crowdsourcing concept?
Yeah, I happen to think that the index ETFs are potential agents of mass destruction. I think what happens, they're terrific vehicles for capturing momentum. For today, you can look at the late 90s and the tech wreck of the 2000s. The large cap indices were very tech heavy because that was what had been going up all through the 90s. We're experiencing some of that same thing right now. The tech companies are starting to become bigger components of the indices. And when the next bear market comes, and I'm not holding my breath, I don't think it's coming immediately, but it's coming, and none of us know the day or hour. All of a sudden, the companies that have done extremely well in the past are going to experience a reversion to the mean, probably more significantly than the companies that were kind of chugging along and not getting their valuations bid up. And so the ETFs, the index ETFs that have become so popular have gotten, I call it a mania. There's just so much money going into them right now, are going to revert to the mean harder and faster than the comparable actively managed portfolios, whether they're a manager exchange portfolio, whether they're folio, or whether they're an actively managed fund. So the losers in the next bear market are going to be the ETFs, the index ETFs, and the people who invested in them, who are going to realize that the free lunch that they thought they were getting is not quite as attractive as they thought it was. It's not. There is no free lunch, and we will learn that when the next bear market hits. And ETFs, which seem to be able to just simply ride on the research of everybody else, it turns out that research actually will have paid for itself. And so the losers I see are, all that money that's pouring into the index ETFs, I think, is going to eventually level itself out. They'll still be popular, but they won't be nearly as dominant as they are today, and I guess that makes them the losers. And advisors who are putting their portfolios totally on autopilot, I think, are going to be losers also, because they're going to realize, man, I was way more invested in tech than I realized. I was way more invested in things that had appreciated in value perhaps beyond their actual valuation levels more than I realized. And my clients got hurt by that, and my clients are unhappy, and so I'm going to have to rethink my investment process.
Let's talk a little bit maybe about the service model, if you will. We talked at the beginning of the call about mobile and being able to have a website that works and functions and to provide access to the new client, if you will, in the way that they want. What about the actual services? Do we see the services and the needs of the sort of millennial client being significantly different or requiring an overhaul within advisory firms? I know you talked about this idea of having millennial advisors within a firm, which I think, by the way, is a great idea. But are firms really going to have to make radical changes to what they deliver in terms of service or how they do their business, or is it more of minor adjustments and changes and simply leveraging technology to sort of change the engagement model?
Well, I'll point to one change that I think is well overdue for modernization, if you will, is the traditional client meeting. There's two aspects to the client meeting that have to change. The first is it's a painful process the way most advisors do it. They sit down with a client and they say, all right, we're going to go over your statements. We're going to go over all your financial issues. You're going to have to organize everything, and then my favorite is, we talk about this life planning thing, which I think is really just fundamental data gathering myself, but people insist on calling it life planning. But you sit down with a client and you say, hi, my name's Bob, and your name, Joe and Carol. Good to meet you, Joe and Carol. All right, my first question is, tell me all your fondest and most important dreams, goals, and desires. And then you sit there and you wait for them to give an answer. And if they are not insulted by the fact that a perfect stranger is asking such a personal question so early in the relationship, they're going to blurt out something that will have nothing to do with what they actually think or feel. So the process has got to be more gradual, more gentle, more fun than what most advisors are doing right now. And self-discovery is fun. A client engagement experience would be fun. Sometimes when I speak at conferences, I ask people to raise their hand if they feel like they're getting as many referrals as they deserve based on the service they're giving their clients. Never once have I had more than one person raise their hand, and audiences of thousands, and somebody will timidly raise their hand, and they're the only one. I'll say, look around. None of you are getting the referrals you feel like you deserve. The reason is because the upfront process is painful, and nobody wants to refer their friends and neighbors to a painful process. If you create an initial client engagement experience that's fun and enjoyable, and I've written about this probably 4 or 5 times now in my newsletter, I collect engaging initial client experience models and pass them on to my readers, because I think that alone is probably the best marketing you could do, and it certainly would be a more functional way to get at what people want and need from you as an advisor. The second is, I think the traditional face-to-face conversation is going to be phased out to a face-to-screen conversation where you go on one of the various video conferencing platforms and the client comes on. Maybe they're on their phone, talking to you. Maybe they're at home on the computer. Maybe the husband is one place and the wife is another, and they're talking to you from different locations, and you teleconference in a remote employee from somewhere who gives a presentation. And this it's a much more respectful of people's time way to do things. So, if somebody wants a meeting, you don't say, all right, drive 35 minutes downtown, brave the traffic, see if you can find some parking, walk up to our 14th floor office, sit down, and we'll try and figure out how to make this meeting last an hour because we have to justify the time you spent coming here. Instead, let's do a quick video conference. Let's do a 10-minute video conference, and we'll address whatever it is you want to do right from wherever you are, and we'll figure it out. And if we need another one, we can do another one tomorrow. It's much more respectful of their time, and, of course, it's much more respectful of your time. You're not, chit-chatting. You're getting right to the point, and you're doing it in a more convenient way for clients. So those two aspects, getting a more fun initial client meeting, whether it's video conference or otherwise, and having a more efficient way to actually have those meetings, and particularly a more efficient way to have the periodic meetings. Every advisor, I say, how many of you are having trouble getting clients who are more than 5 years into the relationship to come into your office for that annual meeting? And the answer is everybody. Everybody has trouble getting people to come in after 5 years, because there's really not an hour's worth of conversation to have. And this gives you that key 15-minute conversation that you want to have with them, that they want to have with you without them having to go through the hassle of the traveling and the parking and all the rest of it.
I think that is a great model. And I will say, perhaps somewhat tongue-in-cheek, that the idea of advisors in our profession coming up with a more fun and engaging way to have clients participate in the initial information gathering and uptake is a great thought. And I got to tell you, I've never associated the word fun with that part of the client engagement process.
Well, it tells you where the problem lies, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And I think it's probably a topic that not many people have spent any time thinking about. So it'll be an interesting one to watch and to follow. Maybe just as a way of wrapping up our conversation today, is there one subject, one topic, one area of conversation that we haven't touched on that you think is critical or important at this juncture, and something that maybe we should talk about as a final point?
I just had a conversation with a marketing expert, and she has done a survey that shows that the average financial planning firm spends less than, I think, 0.4% of their top-line revenue on marketing. And she uses a pretty broad definition of marketing. If you have a dedicated staff person, that salary should be included in that amount. If you do seminars, if you do, and of course, most people kind of wait by the phone, and that's their marketing effort. So she did a little research, and she discovered that there is no profession or industry anywhere that spends less than 4% of their top-line revenue on marketing. We financial planners are an outlier by orders of magnitude from everybody else. And that suggests that the financial planning profession is not being nearly aggressive enough in going after the market share that's probably available to fiduciaries who care about their clients, who have expertise beyond the sales and cold calling skills that are taught in the brokerage world, who are much more inclined to help people live better lives than the competition, and yet are only incrementally gaining market share. The last thing I would say is I would hope that the financial planning profession, the true fiduciaries, the people who are really concerned about their clients' lives, will become more aggressive about letting people know that they exist and taking market share away from fundamentally the sales organizations that are pretending to be you and are not you. Make that distinction. I don't think we're spending nearly the time and energy we need to spend to annex a bigger share of that market and help more people and, frankly, rescue people from dysfunctional relationships where they're being told they're getting something that they're not.
I think that's a perfect way to end our conversation. Bob, it's been great speaking with you today.
Okay, well, I enjoyed it. Thank you.
If you'd like to receive more insightful tips about growing your business, sign up for Folio Institutional's blog at info.folioinstitutional.com/blog. Neither Folio Institutional, its parent, Folio FN Incorporated, or any sister companies have a contractual relationship with Inside Information. Folio has not compensated Bob Verres or his firm in any way for this interview.